there, Pearce Patriots. I wanted to talk to you about this year's yearbook contest. This year's yearbook theme is a year in our shoes. So when we're looking at your yearbook cover, we were looking for 4 things: creativity, composition, contrast, and clarity. Also, it must be vertical, which means up and down, or what's called portrait. Now we're going to dive into what each of these mean when it comes to you creating your artwork. So the first is creativity. Now, a year in our shoes probably involves a shoe, but it also involves everything that is you and what is Pearce. So when we're looking for creativity, we want to use images that are your own. You can of course use things like how to draw to start your image, but then you want to make it your own by customizing it using different colors. So here's an example of creativity. So you want to brainstorm a shoe design. So you might want to look up how to draw a certain shoe. At the top left, you also see that people have footprints that could be representational of a shoe too. And then you want to think about the background, showing both real and imaginative images. So you could have just like abstract or designs, or you can have real things around the shoes. Maybe the shoe is stepping on something, it's splashing out colors, or maybe your shoe is just somewhere showing in school. You also want to think about things that are specific to Pearce. So maybe things you've learned. You can think about history you've learned, not just this grade, but other grades too. Things in science and math, things you read about. And for things you read about, you can definitely use your imagination for all the books that might not be nonfiction. So think about fiction books that you read and what kinds of cool things you can draw. You want to think about things that are unique to Pearce, maybe using Pearce colors, maybe your playground or specific areas in the school. You could even use parts of the logo. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is composition and contrast. Now we do this in art automatically, but let's talk about being intentional with it. So composition just means how you arrange things. Yes, you choose how to arrange things on a paper. So instead of just putting everything floating in the middle, let's talk about a few things you can do. So the first one, this shows overlapping. You see the word ideas in a bubble. It's overlapping all the stuff behind it. It's also then kind of hiding some of it, which is cropping. And not everything's straight up and down. Some things are flying off in different directions. You also want maybe a focal point. So here the focal point is the word ideas. So what if instead of a bubble here or a cloud, you had a shoe that said Pearce or something, and then it had all these crazy things coming out of it? That's just one way of how to think about making a composition. Here's another example. See how instead of just having the books all floating, they overlap. They look like they're touching. You can see that you can't see all of the book, and that touching and making things overlap can create that cropping. Things aren't just straight. Even though everything's kind of nice and neat in the middle, it's a little rotated. Here's another example of a yearbook. Now this has a lot going on. You can see the cropping and rotating and overlapping, but look how like the top is kind of plain and big and graphic, and the bottom half has lots of designs. So another thing you can do for contrast is having areas that are kind of simple and areas that are more complicated. Here's another one. And for you guys, you do not have to write Pearce. You do not have to write a year in our shoes or the year. You can write a year in your shoes if you'd like to, or a year in our shoes, but really I would like you just to concentrate on the design because later on I or the yearbook staff can type that in. So once again, we want to have clarity of the image, and if it doesn't involve text, that's okay, we'll type it in later. But if you do put something, you may put a year in our shoes. Now it's a lot of information, but last but not least, please remember it has to be up and down because the yearbook is up and down like a book. All right, now it's your turn. You can use any paper you'd like that is not lined, so computer paper. You can come get a drawing paper from me. It just has to be computer paper sized. So let me know if you have any questions and get a flyer for me. This will be due January 13th.